Today, we're diving into a really fascinating study that takes a huge assumption about language and education and pretty much flips it on its head. The results here might just change the way you think about bilingualism.
So here's the big question, right? The one at the heart of this whole thing, with huge implications for students and for policy. Does speaking a minority language at home actually hold a child back in school? Well, the answer is definitely not as simple as you might think.
So where does this concern even come from? Well, in Russia, there's this official worry, this core assumption we're going to look at. The fear is that if you support minority languages, you might actually weaken the main language, in this case, Russian, and maybe even pose a threat to national unity. Okay, so if you're going to test a big idea like that, where do you go? Researchers found the perfect place, a specific region in Russia called the Republic of Tatarstan. It turns out it's pretty much the ideal natural laboratory for this exact question. And here's why it's so perfect. Just look at the breakdown. Tatarstan is basically a bi-ethnic, bilingual region. You've got a majority Tatar population living right alongside a very large Russian community. It's the ideal setting. Now, the political situation around language here has been a bit of a roller coaster. Back in the 90s, there was this huge push to promote the Tatar language in schools. But then, in the 2000s, things shifted, and the focus swung back to promoting Russian. This created really high stakes for the students we're about to look at. So, how did the researchers actually measure all this? Let's pop the hood and take a look at how they designed the study. And we're not talking about a small sample size here. They surveyed 709 ethnic Tatar students, all in the 9th grade. A number that big gives their findings some serious statistical muscle. So to make a fair comparison, the researchers split the students into two clear groups. First, you have the oral bilinguals. These are the kids who mostly spoke Tatar at home with their parents. And then you have the passive bilinguals, who mainly spoke Russian at home. All right, get ready, because this is where things get really interesting. Once the researchers controlled for all the other factors, like family income or the type of school, the data told a very, very clear story. And for some, a pretty surprising one. And here it is, the main event. That core assumption that speaking Tatar at home would hurt a student's grades was just wrong. The evidence flat out contradicted it. The study found zero negative impact on grades. Zip, nada. But wait, it actually gets even better. Not only was there no harm, there were clear upsides. The students who spoke Tatar at home, those oral bilinguals, were actually more likely to get the top grades in literature and, kind of surprisingly, in chemistry. And check this out. It's almost like speaking Tatar at home acted as a kind of academic safety net. Those same students were also less likely to get the lowest grades in a bunch of subjects, including geometry, physics, and, this is the big one, in the Russian language class. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. What does all this data really mean? What is the single biggest takeaway from this entire piece of research? The researchers themselves said it perfectly. Their evidence directly contradicts that old assumption that bilingualism is somehow a threat to knowing Russian. In fact, if anything, it looked like a benefit. And really, that's the bottom line here. For anyone involved in education, parents, teachers, policymakers, this study is pretty clear. Supporting a child's home language isn't a barrier. It's an asset that actually helps them do better in school. So that leaves us with one final, really important question to chew on. When you have evidence that so clearly points in one direction, challenging these old beliefs, well, what comes next? How should education policy change to reflect what we now know? That's definitely something we're thinking about.